We are ready for our next talk, and for this one, I'd like to bring on Anthony from Aragon to tell you about the future of DAO governance. Please give Anthony a big round of applause.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Obviously, Canada's a beautiful place, beautiful weather. I think at first everybody was like a little bit trepid about moving from Paris or Brussels. And then we came here, now everybody's super excited, and it's like, great, perfect. And we know we're going to be here for a few years, I think. So let's do it. So I'll be talking about growing and securing networks and sort of what's next for governance. Governance is and was supposed to be one of the best possible use cases for the blockchain, right? You saw Vitalik speak about it yesterday. I'm speaking about it today. But there's been a lot of issues over the years of in how we're going to get to where we want to be in terms of providing good governance, and that means organizations being successful or being effective at reaching their goals. So what's next? So obviously, governance is the process by which we make decisions. And until recently, we haven't been able to actually execute on a lot of the decisions that we want to make until we have a blockchain with no intermediary. So we know we can do that, and we know that we can do that as a group now. So the problem, or one of the big problems with governance over the last few years, is that it has not been defined by organizations trying to reach their goals. It's primarily been defined by organizations trying to abide by unclear regulations. And, you know, it's pretty challenging if you're not actually designing your governance to achieve your goals, but to some other regulator somewhere or lawyers telling you what to do when you build your business, that you're going to be successful. Inherently, there was misaligned incentives right off the bat. So that meant that like one form of governance really started to like emerge, and it was mainly to deal with these regulatory, this regulatory uncertainty, and that was this sort of cookie cutter referendum-based governance, which I think by now we've sort of determined doesn't work for most organizations, depending on what stage they're at. Right? Like where in the world, other than maybe in Switzerland, but it only happens sort of quarterly, do all stakeholders, especially large amounts of stakeholders, have to vote on every single decision that needs to be made? It doesn't really make sense, especially for most of the crypto industry, which are mostly startups or organizations that are trying to scale, create products, etc. So as I said, every decision required a token holder-wide referendum. Decision making then becomes very slow, and so does the execution on that. Incentive alignment immediately was off because you have things like equity versus tokens. You have organizations focusing on regulations, not their product. And projects couldn't adapt to this rapidly changing environment. So there are a few exceptions. Lido, Aave, Maker, to some degree, there are a few organizations that are extremely successful, are using this model, but they also have something in common that many other organizations didn't copy. And that's actually they have, to some degree, centralized leadership. Decentralization itself, obviously, is quite broad, right? Like you can have decentralized control, which I'll talk about in a second. You can have decentralized decision making. You can have decentralized leadership. And sometimes centralization is okay. And these three organizations, yes, they have still, their founders are still somewhat involved or heavily involved. They have a group of people that might be working or funded to work. But most importantly is that their protocols are secured because they've decentralized control of that particular aspect. And that particular aspect is what needs to actually be decentralized. But it doesn't mean that they don't have issues themselves. You know, they have to deal with things while they're building their products, like trying to reach quorum, for example. And that is something that they're all struggling with. Here you can see Brantley in the ENS DAO talking about how it's decreasing. You can see the Arbitrum DAOs, delegation is decreased. You can see Lido not reaching quorum 6 times, etc. So this is a huge problem. So the overreaction to the failure of decentralized governance to actually scale throughout the industry to other organizations is that now you basically have status quo. Almost every network in the industry is not decentralizing or opting not to, or not opting to give control to some of their major stakeholders, such as token holders. And this is also going to be a problem that we'll see. So the reality is, though, is that if you are launching a token, it is looking more and more like regulations are moving towards actual decentralized control and those tokens having actual hard power. And here you have Jake Travinsky, you have Miles Jennings from A16Z and Variant Fund, who are also working, they're lawyers, but they're working at the forefront of helping crafting these new regulations. And they really talk about this. They talk about the fact that the current model's broken, that value is being driven away from the tokens to equity to these projects. And this is creating this misaligned incentives, apologies. So we know that regulations are changing. They're heading in a new direction. It looks like control might be something you actually have to start to distribute. And so that means we need to find a better model. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful. So as I mentioned, the thing that they want to focus on is that decentralized ownership and control is the most important aspect, not necessarily decision-making on everything. And that means we need to focus on what actually needs to be decentralized. So the prescription for this is that we need to also look at how much needs to be governed. So there's immutability. We know if something's immutable, it doesn't actually need to be governed. That's the only time. If it's not immutable, then there have to be decisions at some point made. And that's when we want to bring in automation and AI, because then we can start to, as Vitalik put, automate at the center and move humans to the edges. And then finally, if we are unable to make things immutable over time, if we can't automate it, that's when we need to start making decisions over it. So we reduce the amount that actual large groups of people need to actually vote on things or participate on things. And so this leads us to having good governance that has both offense and defense. And I think previously we have always looked as decentralized governance in our industry as something that's defensive. We have to decentralize to secure something. But actually, good governance should also allow you to excel at something, and that's the offense. And so today we'll talk about defense and offense. So number 3, that's protocol resiliency, would be more of how we look at defense, and growth through incentive alignment is how we look at offense. And I'll show you today 2 sort of models via separations of power that allow us to hopefully tackle both. So let's look at the protocol first. So most organizations, most protocols are looking to defend their users, their token holders, their protocol, but without hindering growth. And so there are a few options that we have nowadays that seem to fit potentially both giving away some control while still moving quickly. Optimistic governance was something that was basically invented at least on a blockchain roughly in 2020. It's starting to become more popular again. This allows token holders to have hard power via veto powers. So this means you can have a security council, a team work optimistically. They can work more quickly. But you still have this safeguard. And the safeguard is that token holders, for example, or other stakeholders can actually veto a poor or malicious decision. And then as number 4 there says, you can also add a time lock to exit. This gives everybody the ability to exit the system if they think it's going to be malicious and going to pass. And then something that's really important is something we call separations of power. This means we don't have to have the same governance methodology over the protocol as we do over, let's say, incentivization or grants or whatever other model we might have or any other permission we might actually want to govern, because they may not require the exact same type of governance. So Tyco just launched, obviously a little while ago, but they just moved over their permissions on mainnet to their DAO, and they're exactly using this model. So they have a security council who can put up a proposal for any type of change, and then they have token holders can veto that if they think it's malicious, and then they have the ability to exit after. So here we're actually giving safety and security to all these token holders, users, participants of the network on the blockchain, but also the team can move more quickly rather than having a referendum vote on every protocol upgrade or change. Maybe one day they want to get to that state, but for now that's not realistic. And so what does this look like? So this is what Aragon's been working on. We call it modular governance, but you can start to actually see what this looks like in the UI now. Instead of one governance type for every single decision, we now have different proposal types. And this also is mimicked on our protocol level. So basically, we look at the organization as the executor right? Not token holders or not just a multi-sig. We look at it at the executor level, and then we can start to bake different governance types and different proposal types governing different permissions on one executor. So here we have 3 different proposal types. We have, minting the token, for example. We have protocol upgrades, for example. We have grants, for example, whatever, right? And so within each proposal type, here you can see one, we have a governance methodology that goes in stages. And these stages can be switched, changed for each proposal type. So here you have, for example, 3 stages. The first stage allows you the multi-sig, 1 out of 1 member here, to put up the proposal. If it moves to stage 2, it'll be in a community review. It moves over, and now the token holders can potentially veto if they want to and protect themselves. And then in stage 3, you can easily add a time lock, and they can exit. So that is just 1 proposal type and 1 process within that proposal type. And we can continue to do that for different permissions or different types of proposals. And here you can take a quick look at that. Now the DAO is not token holders. It is not the multi-sig. There are multiple governing bodies in one DAO or one organization, one executor. And they all can have different roles and responsibilities within that organization, whether that be a veto power, whether that be putting up a proposal, whether that be executing a proposal, etc. You get my point. So it's more heading towards like a modular organization where you can actually build what you want, govern different permissions how you want to, and that's how we believe we'll be able to be more successful, rather than one cookie cutter, methodology for every single organization in the industry, which we know at this point doesn't work. So I have to call out that, of course, on Monday, Lido launched optimistic dual governance. This is pretty incredible. So this allows, actually, speaking of multiple governing bodies, and Lido's built on Aragon, this allows LDO holders, so Lido holders, are able to make an upgrade on the protocol, right, by voting, participating. But now they've added in where staked ETH holders, so the actual users, can veto if they disagree with LDO holders. And so this actually now puts the hard power in the hands, only on a veto, of the actual users of the protocol. And Vasily, the founder, a few days ago mentioned that he thought this was some of the best user protection that has ever been implemented, bar none, in the world, full stop, not just our own industry. And this is fantastic because it's all on chain. There's no trusted intermediaries. There's no need for lawyers, etc. And here is Vitalik obviously commenting on it as well. So these are the types of things we can start to get when we actually break down governance more granularly. We can have multiple governing bodies and different processes. We can actually get somewhere where we're trying to go as an organization. So that's the defense of things, right? It's focusing on a methodology of governance that actually defends your protocol, defends your users, and defends your token holders because you have multiple stakeholders. But let's go to the offense now, right? Because that also hasn't gone super well in our industry. Lots of money has flown out the doors in every grant program you can think of. It's not really incentivizing people to do the right things, and they don't typically stay within the system. Often it's mercenary money. They come in, they get their money, they move on to the next L2, to the next L2, to the next network, the next protocol, and nothing's left for those organizations. And so you see grant programs are also a little bit on the decline in our industry as well. So what are we prescribing? This is amazing because we've been building this and now it's really starting to pick up in our industry. It's an old model, but it's actually coming back as new. It's a VE gauge model, and we call it the Token Value Accrual Kit. It was first originated, at least that we're aware of, by Michael from Curve. They have a particular model. It's then Aerodrome has really taken it from there and has been extremely successful. And now we're seeing other organizations come up and start to use this because it's meant to align incentives properly to reach a certain goal. So it's a tokenomics first governance framework, and I'll talk about what that looks like in this diagram here. So TLDR in short, so the token holder can deposit into this voting escrow locker. They receive a token back. And there's a voting power curve, and this is exactly where you can start to play around with it based on your organization. There is a flat curve where the power doesn't change over time. Curve's model, the power starts at the maximum when you lock to a maximum of 4 years, and it degrades over time. So when you're leaving the system and you're the least aligned, you actually have the least amount of power. And the new system we've been working on with projects, who I'll mention in a minute, actually have an increasing power curve. So the longer you stay in the system, the more voting power you get. And so this means you are incentivized to stay longer, to accrue more power, up until a maximum, of course. And then you're able to actually vote through what we call gauges on distributing incentives, emissions, inflation, whatever, towards liquidity pools, whatever you might want. So that's how the system sort of works. And this unlocks what we call the growth flywheel. And every organization, as I said, wants to defend their protocol, right, with a particular form of governance, and every single protocol and project is looking to grow. At least I hope so. And so what this unlocks, this system where you have to lock into the system, participate, and you get rewarded for doing so, is that you get this growth flywheel, where participants lock tokens for a predefined period. In exchange, they receive this VE token. Holders vote via gauges, so they're actually participating, which is also good from, let's say, a regulatory perspective. And then they sort of direct funds to the initiatives that earn the most votes. And then this flywheel begins, where it actually, you retain value for participating, and the more you participate, the more value you retain, and the longer you're in the system, the more incentive aligned you are. So voting power scales with time, commitment, and rewards. There's actual token value accrual, so now the token has actual value. This has been completely disconnected in most of our industry, where the token retains no value from the protocol. Often it goes maybe to the core team, to equity, or there is no value that is distributed, or it's distributed via grants poorly. And then you get stronger governance infrastructure from this as well. So if you end up using this system, what are some of the benefits? So one thing is anti-whale dilution, which I find very interesting, is that so the amount of power that you have as your token holder is the amount of rewards that you can give out. So it's not like voting on one particular thing where a whale may come in, let's say, and nuke what you wanted to vote on or you wanted to fund. Also, the opposite is that if there's like a huge social consensus of people without much actual voting power trying to push a vote in a certain direction, you're not impacted by that either. There's skin in the game long term, of course, because you have to own the token. You have to lock the token for X period of time. This decreases governance risk. And the system we've built is modular, so you can customize, because we know, as I said earlier, that cookie cutter governance doesn't work. One size doesn't fit all. I'm in there Monday to Friday. So lockers give participants skin in the game. Gauges let them decide where it goes. The outcome, real investment for long-term value generation. So let's take a look at some use cases very briefly of how this has gone. So Mode's use case, 6 weeks after deployment, we had 43% of the circulating supply locked. This is also good from a tokenomic perspective. We had over 7,000 unique voters who participated. You won't find these types of numbers in any traditional voting system. And 31,000 votes were cast via gauges. Some other users of the system, Aerodrome, Pendle, Curve, you can see that 98% of token holders locked for 4 years, the maximum amount they could lock. And roughly 3.75, 3.65 years is the average lockup within those systems of those token holders. So token holders on systems and in organizations that are doing quite well are willing to lock for a long period of time. This also is great so that the organization, token holders know when these unlocks are occurring. It's all very transparent as well. And so we also know now that, based on some Curve's data, that this model locks approximately 3 times more tokens than when we removed through a burn mechanism. Right now, everybody in the industry is discussing this like fee switch, the fee switch. They're doing buybacks, and many are just burning these tokens away, while others using this model are creating a token sink. And you can see now, and obviously there's not a ton of data in our industry on these types of things, Curve is the oldest using this mechanism, that it is more impactful at decreasing the total supply using a locking mechanism rather than a buyback and burn. And hopefully we'll get more information from Aerodrome and other organizations that are a bit younger soon as well to validate this. And thanks to Michael from Curve for this information. So there's other use cases. We have Celo Public Goods are using it to fund different apps that they want to build on top of the Celo network. Puffer are using it as well to incentivize providing liquidity. And we're very excited to announce that we're actually going to be working with Katana, which was a new chain. I think it went on mainnet maybe even yesterday, incubated by Polygon and GSR, that will also be using this system along with VaultBridge to incentivize users to participate in the network, secure the network, and be involved in the system. So really exciting that probably one of the biggest, newest chains launching is using the system as well. We're continuing to see huge growth in the VE gauge model versus a traditional model because it signals true accountability and that you want to accrue value to your token, and that means people may want to actually own that token and participate in that network. So I'm out of time. 5 seconds left. The value accrual toolkit is open source now. Anybody can take it. You can run with it. You can use it for your project. It comes with a UI kit as well and an app template, or just reach out to us. We're happy to help you build your token value accrual mechanisms, as well as the defensive side, not as sexy, but of defending your protocols. But at the end of the day, right, governance is the process by which we make and execute on decisions. It can be offensive and defensive. The key is to not fade it. You have to be thoughtful about this. If you listen to any major podcast recently with Lex Fridman and some of the co-founders who go on there, they all talk about how important it is. If you're not going to be immutable, you have to make decisions. So put yourself in a situation to make the best decisions and speak to experts so you don't fall into traps laid out by regulators or lawyers who lead you in the wrong direction. So thank you so much. Be thoughtful, everybody. That's it. You can find me here.
Thanks, Anthony. This is awesome. Hopefully we get to actually see all these new projects actually implement all these new mechanisms and change kind of how we think about DeFi, especially.
It's time. We definitely need to make some change. Thank you so much.
That'll be wonderful. Well, thank you.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.